Hello, good morning, sir. My name is Olabode Ogun, and I'll be representing Group D for the project management assignment that was given. The topic assigned to Group D is identifying stakeholders in project management. Here are the list of contributors who made research and came up with the content that was used to prepare the slides. Introduction. Before we go into the topic of identifying stakeholders, it is important for us to know what a project is. So, a project is a unique process that consists of a set of coordinated activities with start date and end, with the aim of achieving an objective. So, in essence, what a project simply means is that it is meant to solve a problem. So, every end goal of a project is to solve a problem or provide solution to a problem. It could be existing or it could be a new problem. Now that we have a background of what a project is, it is important for us to talk about the stakeholders. Stakeholders are a group of people or individual that may be internal or external to a company. So what this means is that stakeholders can be a group of persons or an individual who would influence or impact how a project is going to be carried out. Definition of stakeholders. According to Edward R. Freeman, 1984, stakeholders encompass a diverse range of entities that can impact or be impacted by a project. What this means is that being a stakeholder is a two-way thing. One could be impacted, or one could be the one providing the impact to other people. So that is what it actually means. Significance of stakeholders. Stakeholders wield significant influence over a project's success or failure. So, as a stakeholder, it is important for us to understand that for every stakeholder, they can wield significant influence over a project. Number one that we have on the list is influence on project objective. Stakeholders often have varying perspective, interest, and objectives regarding a project. Number two that we have here is resource allocation and support. For every project that we embark on, the significance of the stakeholders, they would give us a good number of support, and then they contribute valuable resources such as funding, expertise, and manpower in the project initiative. The third one we have on the list in the significance of stakeholders is risk identification and mitigation. So when we have good stakeholders on our project, it helps us to quickly identify risk, and then we set up a process to mitigate those risks. The fourth one we have is stakeholder engagement and communication. Effective communication with stakeholders are critical for fostering collaboration throughout the project lifecycle. So when we communicate properly with our stakeholders, it helps us to foster a good collaboration throughout the project lifecycle. And then the fifth one on the significance of stakeholders is impact on project success. With good stakeholders and stakeholders on our project, we have good chances of having a successful project at the end of the day, which is always the objective of every project, to provide a solution to a problem. Now, stakeholders identification. Identifying stakeholders consists of identifying the persons, groups, or organizations that may affect a decision or be affected by a project, activity, or its final outcome. So, for us to identify stakeholders, we need to understand why are we even going to identify these stakeholders. So, it is good for us to just know that we are focused on the outcome of that project. That is why we need to identify good stakeholders for our project. Techniques for identifying stakeholders. The number one we have on the list is stakeholder identification matrix. What this means is that for every stakeholder we want to identify, we need to have a matrix, like a list of checklists for us to check in order to identify the particular stakeholder that would influence our project the positive way. So number two that we have is stakeholder interview. This is part of the technique for identifying stakeholders. When we conduct interviews, it helps us to understand the perspective of the particular stakeholder, such as understanding their own point of view, how they see the project, how they want the project to actually run. It helps them to understand. So when we conduct a stakeholder interview, it helps us to understand the kind of stakeholder we are bringing onto our project. The third one on the list is stakeholder analysis. So because we have a large pool of people who would want to become a stakeholder in our project, it is quite necessary for us to do a stakeholder analysis, perform analytical checks, check their previous and historical project that they've worked on. So it helps us to know what kind of project we are going to bring the stakeholders into. Then the fourth one on the list is brainstorming session. So brainstorming session allows team members who are going to bring on stakeholders to look and analyze the kind of stakeholders they will bring. It also helps uncover additional stakeholders who may have been overlooked initially. Now, in as much as we've spoken about the good part of stakeholder identifying them, the significance, the goal of what they come onto our project to contribute in. Now, it is also good for us to know that there are also challenges in terms of identifying stakeholders. It is not always easy. And so the first point we have on the list is lack of clarity on project scope. When there is lack of clarity on project scope, it makes it even more challenging to identify the right stakeholders for our project. Now, the second one is stakeholder resistance. Stakeholders can be identified, but in the process of identifying them, if they are not interested in that project and we have already identified them, oh, this person is going to be a very good stakeholder for us, and then they say no, they don't want to be part of the project, it becomes a problem because their no is more like the projects can't go forward at that time. The third we have on the list in challenges in stakeholder identification is stakeholder dynamic. Now, stakeholder dynamic simply means different people coming in and then they have different values, they share different opinion on a particular project. They look at power tussle, the political side of the project, who is going to lead the project, who is going to head certain things. So all of this can be very challenging, and there are processes that should be put in place to solve this kind of problem in stakeholder dynamic. The fourth one on the list is incomplete stakeholder representation. Another challenge in stakeholder identification is the risk of overlooking certain stakeholder groups, particularly those with less visible interest in the project. So when there is less visibility on a particular project, the stakeholder representation might be misleading at times. So strategies for effective stakeholder management. In as much as we've identified the processes of identifying good stakeholders, let's assume for a fact that we've been able to bring up stakeholders onto our project. What are the ways for us to effectively manage how they perceive or how they do the project and then ensure everybody is carried along? So, number one is for us to engage early and often. Effective stakeholder management begins with early and continuous engagement by involving stakeholders from project's inception. So if we have a project that's supposed to last 1 year, we cannot be engaging the project and the stakeholders by the 8th month. It doesn't even work. It won't work. The project is almost going to be a failure. So we need to engage them as soon as we've identified a problem and want to solve it, and we bring on the stakeholders and then we engage them early and often. So the second on the list is tailor communication strategies. We need to tailor specific communication strategies for all our stakeholders. The way we communicate with someone who is in the US and who is on taking on to a project will be different from the way we communicate with someone who is in Nigeria. We might need to do more of communication with the virtual communication with the person in the US, while we do a bit of virtual and physical communication with the stakeholder who is in Nigeria. So it's just tailor different communication channel that will just foster a very good collaborative process to ensure that the project does not suffer at any point. Then the third one we have is address stakeholder concerns. Proactively addressing stakeholder concerns and grievances is essential for maintaining positive stakeholder relationships. The fourth one we have is managing expectations. Stakeholders are going to come onto a project with different set of expectations because they have different backgrounds. So managing stakeholder expectations is critical for avoiding disappointment and fostering realistic project outcomes. Types of stakeholders in project management. Number one, we have internal stakeholders. These are a group of people who are not in for the profit of the organization, but they are in for the overall success of that particular project. They could be individuals, they could be managers, they could be employees or volunteers who want to work on that project. Number two, we have is external stakeholders. Businesses are increasingly aware of the need to maintain a positive reputation in the marketplace. So when they come onto a project, they want to be very professional about it. So we identify these kind of people as the external stakeholders who are business oriented to the project. They see the business perspective of that project. Then we have the third one, phantom stakeholders. people who are subject to, part of, or impacted by the project, yet have not been formally identified by the project. So these phantom stakeholders are usually between the internal and external stakeholders. We've not really identified them as officially to be part of the project, but they contribute to the project. Then the fourth one is key stakeholders. Key stakeholders are more like on the top hierarchy of project stakeholders category. They have high power, high interest stakeholders are key players. We cannot rule out the key players in our project because they make a lot of decisions in terms of finance, in terms of decision making, the whole process. In fact, when key stakeholders pull out of a project, the project is almost likely going to fail because their decision, they are powerful, they have interest, they have vested interest, they know a lot of things about the project, and their decisions are very, very key to our projects. Conclusion: identifying stakeholders is a foundational step in project management that sets the stage for successful project delivery. I hope with the points that I've been giving in this slides on the topic identifying stakeholders in project management will help anyone who is trying to get into project management to understand the processes and the risk and the process to mitigate risk involved in project management. Thank you, sir.